Hi, this is Risa and welcome back to my Stitch Along series. I'm going to show you how to stitch 4 gorgeous ribbon embroidery pendants, starting with the tulips and iris pendants here. This is part 1 of a 2-part video series where I'm using designs that are inspired by Niekerk's Ribbon Embroidery and Stumpwork book. There is a book review for this which you can watch by clicking on the link above. In this video, I'm just going to flip directly to the patterns page so I can show you how I've adapted the designs to fit these small pendants. As you can see here, the pattern size is larger than the pendants. So what I did was I photocopied the page by reducing the size to about 86% in the printer, and I find that the size of the flower patterns then fits perfectly within the boundaries of the pendant. So what I did was I traced the outlines of the pendant bezel to have a frame within which to trace the flowers. So the tulip here, for example, fits within the frame. So if you're interested in making these gorgeous pendants and you have Niekerk's book or not, stick around and stitch the tulip and iris pendants with me. The first thing to do is to prepare the fabric, and I use some pinking scissors to cut out the edges of the silk dupion that I will be working on to prevent fraying. Now I'm going to trace the pattern, and I'm going to start with the tulips here. And that was the bezel that you just saw that I used to trace the frame. And here's the design for the iris. Now you can choose any part of the flower design if you have Niekerk's book. The next step is to have a piece of muslin that you will need as backing for your fabric. As you can see, I've traced all 4 designs and I'm mounting it on a 10-inch hoop. But this particular video will focus on the tulip and iris design. Let's start with the iris for the stitch along. Let me show you the materials you'll need. You'll need a 7 mm silk ribbon and a 4 mm silk ribbon in yellow. I'm using river silks, you can use any other. You'll need a 4 mm brownish yellow silk ribbon, a 7 mm organza green ribbon, some green pearl thread, and some wire. You'll also need a flat iron in order to iron the ribbons before you start embroidering. Then you'll need a number 18 chenille needle, and to insert the ribbon you'll need to cut a 45-degree angle and insert the pointed end here. And then to rest it, reinsert the needle at the edge and pull it through. Now at the other end, you can fold the ribbon and insert the needle in the center and just pull it through, and you'll get a nice square backing that will arrest when you start stitching. Now I will need to start cutting the wires to size, and you'll need some wire cutters to do that. Now you don't necessarily need the wires to stitch the stems. You can stitch it with thread using stem stitch or with ribbons using twisted stitch, and that'll work fine as well. I'm going to start by stitching a twisted ribbon stitch using the 6 mm organza ribbon here, and that's because that's going to be a background leaf behind the stem. And similarly here, I'm going to stitch ribbon stitch here and another twisted inverted ribbon stitch in this corner. I'm going to go to the back and insert the ribbon in between the muslin and the fabric and just stitch the tails to the muslin. So you don't need to pierce the front fabric, just work by using the muslin. Now I'm going to stitch or couch the wire for the stems, and I'm using 2 strands of the pearl thread that I had to first couch the wire in place, and then essentially just keep stitching around the wire very closely so you get a neat look for the stem. And I'm going to do the same thing here for the second stem, and there's a third for the third flower. To stitch the irises, I'll need the 7 mm silk ribbon, and I'm going to stitch a detach chain stitch or detach lazy daisy stitch here. And as you can see, I'm inserting the ribbon close to where it came out in the fabric, and I'm going to bring it up at the top of the flower, take it into the loop, and then arrest it very so lightly back into the fabric. So you don't want to pull too tight, you want a nice puffy look for the top of the petal. Similarly, at the bottom you create another detached chain stitch, a little smaller than the top one, and pull through and attach it. So I'm going to do this now for the second flower as well. As you can see, I am not pulling too tight. I'm trying to give it a little bit of a puffy look with the 7mm silk ribbon. Once you're done with the top and the bottom lips of the iris flowers, you can stitch the side petals with detached chain stitches as well. Now for the bud here, I'm going to use the 4mm yellow ribbon to stitch a detached chain stitch again. To give it a 3D look, I'm going to use the 4mm silk ribbon and stitch a second layer of a detached chain stitch here for the top petal and a ribbon stitch for the bottom petal. And I'll do the same for the bud and the third flower. You can also use the 4mm brownish ribbon to do the same. Moving on to stitching the tulip pendants. As you can see, I've already traced the pattern, and the materials I'm using are 4mm red ribbon and 4mm green variated ribbon that I bought from Niekerk's website, and this is the number 132 for the green. Then I'm going to use a dark green 4mm ribbon from River Silks and some pearl thread. Now what I found was, while ironing the red ribbon, there's a little bit of stain on my straightening iron, which I removed with some nail polish remover. To start off, I'm going to substitute the bead with a French knot to create the center of the tulip, and then I'm going to stitch simple ribbon stitches close to the top here, as you can see, and keep going until I fully cover the French knot. So don't pull the ribbon right through. You need to insert the needle in the center of the ribbon and then pull carefully, and you get a nice little sharp edge when you stitch close to the French knot at the top. So I'm going to do that again. French knot here to create the puffiness in lieu of a bead. If you have beads, you can use beads, of course. And then ribbon stitches to create the petals at the top. I'm going to use a twisted ribbon stitch to stitch the stems for the tulip, and here I'm going to insert that needle right under the flower and then a straight stitch over that. And for this particular stem, I'm going to couch that twisted stitch where I want it to curve. So you can do that to give it a nice curved natural look. I'm going to do the same here with a straight stitch at the bottom of the tulip, and I'm going to couch this twisted stitch again to give it a nice bend. The final step is to stitch twisted ribbon stitches for the leaves with the 4mm dark green ribbon. Stitching a twisted ribbon stitch is pretty easy to do. You just twist the ribbon and then insert the needle in the center of the ribbon and pull through. So I'm going to do that here as well. I'm twisting it and then I'm inserting the ribbon in the center and pulling through. To ensure that that leaf stays twisted, I'm going to use one strand of green thread to stitch a stab stitch here right under the curve of that leaf to arrest that leaf in place, and I'm going to do that for the other leaf as well. And finally ending off by stitching the tails of the ribbons. As you can see, I've finished the 4 flowers. You can watch the stitch along for the Delphinium and the Fuchsia by clicking on the link above. I'm just going to focus on completing the tulip and iris pendant in this video. So I'm cutting all of the flowers, and the first thing to do is to cut out the muslin close to the embroidery at the back here, and then move on to cutting about 2 to 3 centimeter sort of space around the embroidery here, so you can use that material to fold over the bezel. Now I still have the outline of the bezel on the fabric which I need to remove, and I'm going to do that by using a hairdryer, and you might need to do it for a few minutes until you see the lines disappear. To attach the embroidery to the pendant kit, you'll need some paper clips, some fray glue, some E6000 transparent permanent glue, and some white floss. You'll also need maybe a piece of wood to apply the glue on to the pendant. Now, the first thing you need to do is to run some running stitches close to the edge of the fabric. I'm using the bezel as sort of a guide, but you don't need to if you have running stitches just about 2 to 3 millimeters off the edge. Now once you've done that, you can pull the fabric together and then adjust the position of the embroidery around the metal bezel, and then carry out some stitches at the back to pull the fabric tight across the bezel. There it is, fits well. Now I'm applying some E6000 glue here, trying to smooth it out. Don't put too much, otherwise it'll get bulky when you attach the pendant. So there it is, that's ready, and I'm using the paper clips to hold the pendant in place until it sets in about 24 hours. Repeat the steps to attach the tulip to the pendant. I didn't show you this, but I'm just putting a bit of fray glue on the back of the fabric to prevent the material from fraying. And there we have it. Thank you for watching. I hope this is going to be useful. Don't forget to click on the subscribe, like, and notification buttons. See you again next time. Bye bye.